All right, welcome everyone. Starting to file in. I'm Aaron with Contractors Cloud, joined by the wonderful Mike Campa. If you are on here and you can see and hear us just fine, if anybody wants to drop that into the chat that you are hearing and seeing us just fine, that would be great. Then I know that Mike and I are not just talking to ourselves this afternoon. All right. Anyone want to drop into the chat that they can see and hear us just fine? I see a hand raised. All right, raised hands. All right, cool. I'm going to take the raised hands that you can hear us. Thank you. Perfect. And I might not have turned a chat on for the webinar. So that might be why maybe you can't chat us, but I see some people putting it in. Yes, chat is disabled. All right. I'm not going to go mess with that right now. Next time, maybe I will turn on the chat. But just so you know, that Q&A tab that you've already used, that's where you can drop in any questions that you have as we go through the webinar as well. All right. We have a good amount that have filed in. So with that, I am going to share my screen besides us, and we will get started from there. All right. Well, welcome everyone to this first Contractors Cloud webinar. And more of these to come too. We're excited to put this one together today, talking about Zapier and a little bit about Milestones. But this is something that we hope to do on a more consistent basis in order to bring everyone a little more insight to what we're building, what features are already here that you could be utilizing even more, to learn more about, to understand more. So a lot of great things to come as hopefully you've noticed between the end of last year, and that's been my role. I'm Aaron, and my role has been to expand our communication, creating a little bit more community around everything. So the emails that you've been receiving every few months are from me, and those will continue to happen. These webinars will happen. So stay tuned as we look to just shed more light on all the things that Contractors Cloud has to offer. And we have so much coming down the pipeline as we get towards fall and winter this year that we're excited to share. Few housekeeping things. Yes, we are recording this. So we will post that to our blog tomorrow and to YouTube as well. So you can rewatch this. You can just rewatch a certain piece of the recording that's of interest to you, or review it if you want to go back and try to set something up similar to what Mike is going to walk you through today. So that recording will be at your fingertips and posted tomorrow. We will be covering the lion's share of this. We'll be looking at Zapier, which is one of the most popular automation tools that's out there. And Mike will walk us through some sample use cases that will be of benefit to you as well, helping you learn the ins and outs of Zapier and how to use it with Contractors Cloud to automate data and information sharing between multiple applications. We'll also do a little bit of a dive on Milestones as we get to the end. Milestones are a great feature, part of our workflows as you set those up. Mike's going to have some great insight on some efficiency wins, some tips on how to get more out of it. We recently just had a blog post on Milestones as well that hopefully you checked out in our last email. And as I already hinted at, and for those of you just arriving in, use that Q&A tab for questions. I will be interjecting those as it makes sense within the presentation to bring those to light so that we can answer those, or just depending upon what the topic is, we might save it and try to answer as many as we can towards the end. So please use that Q&A tab. Obviously, even internally at Contractors Cloud, the excitement has been high for our first webinar. This made it into our internal communication channels here today. So a little tool time theme for Mike and I. We'll let you guess who did it. It was Wilson, aka our president Dwight, who made that photo. Not the greatest Photoshop skills, but it got the job done. All right, so let me tee a few things up here. Zapier, if you are not familiar with Zapier, I always throw out, and Zapier is one that coined this, Rhymes with happier, if you need to know how to say it. I definitely hear a lot of different pronunciations. But Zapier, what Zapier is a no-code automation tool. So this allows you, once you understand how their framework works and what you can do with it, to be able to connect two or more applications together to automatically run processes and share information. In their world, they call that connection a zap. So once you connect two or more apps together, that's called a zap. And there's a lot of different options that you can do with it, as Mike's going to walk you through in our 3 examples today. Overall, there's over 8,000 apps in Zapier, right? If you just look at our visual to the side, it's everything from behemoths like Salesforce and Facebook and all the different Google products like Sheets and Gmail and Calendar, OpenAI, Calendly, MailChimp, Sumo app, you name it. Again, there's 8,000 of them out there. Zapier has become the most common no-code connector that's out there. I often tell people, no matter what type of software that you're shopping for, if they don't have Zapier connections or abilities, I would definitely think hard about before buying another product that's more of a closed product that you can't build some of these automations yourself. Of course, these are spread across all types of different applications in sales and marketing and accounting, AI, scheduling, support, email, and more. So there's really no end to the things that you can create with it. And Zapier is a paid-for product on its own. So you do need an account. They do have a free plan, so you can get in and kick the tires and start messing around. Their monthly plans start at $20, and their fees are kind of usage-based. So it depends upon how many tasks, how many automations, and how often they're running based on what you build. Zapier follows this basic framework, and these are some of the things that Mike is going to walk you through today. But at a minimum, this is what you need to understand with Zapier. It's a 2-stage format. It's a trigger, meaning when this event happens, then an action in another app. Automatically do this. The real world of this is my trigger is I flip the light switch, and the action is the light turns on. And in the software world, it can be a number of things. But like the first one we're going to dive into, the trigger is when you add a new spreadsheet row to a Google Sheet, it will then automatically create a lead in Contractors Cloud. So within this, that's how you're always thinking. You're setting up a trigger and action. When this happens, automatically do this. So that's kind of the framework to keep in mind when we look at these. Also to mention, as you'll see, we walk through the zaps and they get a little bit more complex to what Mike is going to show you. Zapier itself has a number of apps that you can use in between processes to specifically filter information, provide conditions, custom logic, and things like that. So it might delay the timing of when something runs. It might format the data into a specific format that you need it. It might only look for a specific field, even though there's 30 fields available, and filter down to just that one field. So there's over 30 of these internal Zapier apps, and these really help modify the zaps that you build to be more intelligent, more specific, and do a number of different things that can really help you build a more robust automation. And Mike will touch on those. So the zap number one that we're going to look at today is, just as we hinted at there, is what happens if we add information in Google Sheets in a new row and moving that into Contractors Cloud as a lead. And the thing to keep in mind, right, when we go through these zap examples is you can kind of replace the app of what Contractors Cloud is working with any other number of apps. So this could be information being captured in Calendly or Sumo Quote or Pipedrive, and then based on the trigger that you choose in those apps, it would then create that lead in Contractors Cloud. So even though we're just demonstrating one, it's something as a trigger that can be flipped out into multiple different things in order to start your automation of moving something from a sales, a scheduling, some type of an information capture event and into Contractors Cloud as a lead. All right, so with that, I will stop my share and turn it over to Mike Campa.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, to kind of expand on that, we're basically looking at Contractors Cloud's action within Zapier for this first zap. Before we even kind of dive into the Zapier piece of it, you may have noticed when you go into your sign-in page in Contractors Cloud that we now have our beta version Stratus available. That's where we're going to be setting up a couple of the necessary things that we need to run a Zap or to make any call through our API, which is what Zapier does. So I'm logged into Stratus here. And if I click on the little settings wheel down on the bottom right, I can go up to my integrations area. And this is kind of your hub for managing anything that's going to flow into Contractors Cloud. You're going to need a couple of things when we actually go into Zapier. The first thing is an API access token. So up here are API access tokens. These are basically your authentication, or when we get a call from Zapier or we get a call from any other software, we need to authenticate, hey, on whose behalf is this call happening? So we need to create an access token. I've created mine for the Zap that we've already have in place here, but it's as simple as adding this. We could call this a test token, and this is now a token made on my behalf, where you're going to get this kind of one-time string where you'd want to save this information, because this is now kind of your unique ID to authenticate as you for any calls that you'd want to make to us. The other thing that we're going to need is what we would call a lead connection. So you'll see on this spreadsheet, I'm going to have very minimal information. A lot of softwares that you're going to use might have minimal information. So if we're doing, canvassing, we're kind of out and about, we've got things that we're qualifying. Contractors Cloud requires a few additional steps or additional things defined in order for us to actually create a project. So things like an event, things like a workflow, a lead source, a site type, right? These are all things that another software, a spreadsheet, a web form, Calendly link, none of that is gonna know that we require that. So this is a way for us to provide some defaults, and it's kind of the vehicle that we can run our leads through. When we create that lead connection, we can also set a couple of settings to just make sure that we try to convert these leads into projects automatically. So that means as long as there's no missing data, this will just become a project into Contractors Cloud. If there is something missing, then it's going to kind of end up in our coat room, or our place that needs fixing, right? Whether we're missing an address or a name or something like that. The other thing we can do is ignore custom field requirements. So when you create a lead in Contractors Cloud or a project, there might be some required custom fields that you've set up within your company, like date of loss, or has an insurance claim been filed yet, yes or no. This is just a way for us to ignore those requirements and basically bypass them, just to make it easier to get these leads in, and then we can do what we need to do with them. So that's kind of the two things that you're going to need before you really even step into Zapier in order to get things into Contractors Cloud. You're going to need that access token, and you're going to need a lead connection. When you'll see when I have that lead connection, we're going to see a lead connection ID come along with that. So once that is set up, then we can actually go into Zapier and create your new Zap. I've got this one already created here. We're going to create a lead. Our trigger is, if I edit this, again, just a spreadsheet, keeping it simple. We set these up by connecting your Google account, choosing what your trigger event is going to be. So we're going to do a new or updated spreadsheet row. We're going to connect our Google account. Then we're going to choose which spreadsheet we need, which worksheet we want, and you can even select, like which column. Hey, once the first name goes in there, that's when I want it to go. From there, then we can test these triggers. So basically, we can find records, and once you've connected that spreadsheet, I can pull in data from that spreadsheet. So here is the spreadsheet that we're looking at. Here is my data. And when I go ahead and look and find these records, we're seeing the data from that spreadsheet, and each one of these is an individual data point that we can use and map further down the road. So that looks good there. Then we go into our action, right? So trigger is a new row. Action is that we want to use Contractors Cloud to create that lead. So when we go into step 2, first thing we're going to do is, choose Contractors Cloud as our application. Our action event is going to be to create that lead. And then we're going to see our account. So this would be in correlation to those access tokens, right? So when we go into Stratus and create that access token, if you've, got it already connected, it'll let you choose between any of them that you have made, or we can connect a new account. And that's just going to give you a little pop-out window to paste that access token that was generated when you created an access key. Once you connect that, your account is connected. Then we can configure from our, whatever this trigger is. In this case, it's that spreadsheet. And this is just sort of mapping data, to say all these top ones are our Contractors Cloud items here. And then inside of those are, our data points that we're mapping, right? So for first name in the spreadsheet, I want the first name column. For last name, I want the last name column. At the very, very top, we've got our lead connection ID. So this would be once you've accessed, or connected your Contractors Cloud in the setup area, it's going to recognize any of the lead connections that you've already set up. And so you can just make sure that these IDs match the setup ID that you made. And we'll use that ID. We've mapped out all of our fields. Our site type and our lead source, we're going to leave those blank because that's sort of where that lead connection comes into play, of us being able to set those defaults. And from there, then we can go ahead and test this Zap. So if I were to just retest this, we're now going to try and send this lead into Contractors Cloud. Looks like a lead was detected. So if we go back into our Contractors Cloud area, here in Stratus, in this same portal where we set up our tokens, we set up our lead connection, there's also a section for leads. And then you'll see right here, this lead came through, successful. I can open that project, or you'll notice if I go into our projects here, that project now exists. So that's just a way to get a clean project into Contractors Cloud using Zapier. If anything is missing, so if I look in our settings wheel and in that integrations page again, if anything's missing and it needs review, that's going to give us a needs review tag in here. So this is kind of a really good place to monitor, if you start setting up these apps and wanting things to flow in here, you'll be able to tell pretty quickly, hey, are we getting good data? Are things coming through automatically? Or are there things that need to be addressed? Is the state coming over is an incorrect format, or are we missing names, or is something not mapped correctly? Those are very simply just opening them up. You can fix whatever needs to be fixed, and then you can generate them into an actual project once we have everything that we need. That's really just kind of the basics of how we use our action within Zapier, and that would just be any of those other softwares, connecting to bring over jobs into Contractors Cloud whenever you see fit. Some, maybe it's right away when we make contact, maybe it's we want to make sure they're qualified first. That would all kind of land on the different triggers, from those different softwares that you are looking to connect. With that, I'll give this back to Aaron. Oh, you're on mute, Aaron.
I thought I'd unmuted myself, but I guess not. So You can tell by my hand, I was saying something really exciting, right?
For sure.
All right. So no, I was just saying, great recap of one of the most straightforward ways to work with Zapier, just a two-step zap. Now we're going to dive into ones a little bit more complex. One thing I wanted to point out that I really like over the last year is Zapier has worked a lot of AI into their product. One of the things they've made easier is initial creation of those zaps, right? Like Mike didn't go through the process of the initial selection of what's the trigger app and what is the action app. So you can actually go to create a zap and just write in plain English what you're looking to do. And then Zapier will kind of go and take its best guess or take what you've written in and use AI to then populate the steps it thinks you're going to need in that zap. So it gives you a really simple start to go with if you're just typing in, when I add a new row to Google Sheets, allow me to create a new lead in Contractors Cloud. It would automatically take you to exactly where Mike was starting you with those two apps already selected just from writing one sentence on it. Or you can still go through, just look up an app, grab that one and say, I want to create a zap using this as a trigger and this is an action with it. So with that, that's going to bring up our second zap that we want to look at. Now we're going to be looking at capturing information that is coming out of Contractors Cloud. And this is coming out using a technology called webhook. And webhook's really the easiest way I try to frame this up for people is consider a webhook to be broadcasting information. It's like a radio station. And when you set things up to listen for a specific event or specific information out of that webhook, it's like turning into the right radio station to get the commentary, the music, the sports play-by-play that you want to hear. So what this is allowing you to do is tune in to information that Contractors Cloud is broadcasting out through webhooks, and then you're going to catch specific information out of it to do certain things to then set up that automation so things automatically happen. So in this first one that we're going to look at here for catching a webhook, the use case here is for nurturing a lead. So how we frame this up is when a project hits the estimate and proposal status in Contractors Cloud. So just changing that status to estimate and proposal, that's the trigger that we're using a webhook for. And then it's going to send that contact information into your communication application, an email or SMS app. So this could be something like Podium or Constant Contact, TextDrip, Textedly. And in Mike's example, he's going to pair it up with MailChimp so we can see how that works. So with that, Mike, I will let you take back over and jump into showing us how this app works.
Perfect. All right. So back in Zapier, this would be using webhooks out of Contractors Cloud is going to be something where your Zap isn't necessarily going to show Contractors Cloud because our action is to create a lead. But here we're just using Contractors Cloud on the front end to generate a webhook, and we're catching that webhook within Zapier. So to start this process, you would go into Zapier and you'd create a new Zap, and in step number 1, which is going to be your trigger. The application is just going to be webhooks by Zapier, and their event is just going to be catching that webhook. So really, really simple, really easy to set up. We can go into the configuration. This is actually an entirely optional thing that's a little more advanced. Don't need to really bother going into it. But then we get into the test piece of it, and Zapier will generate you a URL. So they'll generate a URL, which is basically the landing point where we would place within Contractors Cloud to, send this information when this event happens. We want to send it to this URL so that it catches it here within this Zap. Inside of Contractors Cloud, this is going to end up in the same area. So within Stratus, in that integrations area, you're going to see an option for webhooks. And this would be another spot where we're coming in, we're just creating a new webhook here, and we're pasting that URL that's in Zapier right here and saving it. That's all you have to do in order to create a webhook. And then once that webhook is created, so for example, here's one. These are the webhook events that are currently available inside of Contractors Cloud. So basically, we can broadcast a payload or information from the job inside of Contractors Cloud whenever any of these things happen. So for today, we're selecting that a project status is updated. That means that anytime a project status is updated, so no matter what status it is updated to, we are going to send off this webhook. And it's kind of the responsibility of Zapier, and I'll kind of show you how, Zapier and filtering to listen for the right things, right? Because we're keeping this pretty broad. Hey, whenever a new project is created, or whenever a jet stream is created, or whenever a project status is updated, that's really kind of anything within Contractors Cloud that meets that criteria. So we're saying anytime a status gets updated, we're going to fire off a webhook. And then in Zapier, so when we go back into Zapier, we are able to then find that record, right? So if I were to find that record, we've kicked out a status change, and we're able to collect all of this different data from within Contractors Cloud. So we can see things like the address. We can see things like who the rep is. We can see some financial data within that job. We have access to project subcategories, project status, which is going to be really important here, as well as contact information. So catching that webhook, we're basically saying anytime a status changes in Contractors Cloud, we're going to send it over, and we're going to end up with a payload here. The next step before, I don't want this, maybe I have a specific journey set up in MailChimp or some other messaging app or nurturing app. I don't necessarily want every status to go through there, right? There might be plenty of different times that I want different campaigns entirely to go out. So that's where there's this cool feature from Zapier that's just filtering. And so when we get into filtering, we can go ahead and use any of the data points that have come in from that first webhook that we caught, right? So in this example, we caught a webhook with all that different information. We had financial data, we had address, phone numbers, all those different things. One of those things is the project status that comes over. So we are basically only continuing this this zap if our data status name, so our actual job status, contains estimate/proposal. So that would mean any other status inside of Contractors Cloud, this is going to fail, and it's not going to run us the rest of the way.
And Mike, can you touch
yeah.
on real quick just some of the different filtering options, right? You have text contains, but
Sure.
hitting that.
Yeah. Yep. So yep, we can also do text exactly matches. We can do starting with. We can do numbers greater than or less than. And we can also do, like in the one below it here, is we have contact cell phone, and we make sure that exists, right? We don't send this through to any sort of texting application if we never got their phone number, from within Contractors Cloud, or that we don't have it on record. So yeah, there's tons of different options in here to basically take that general payload that we give and format it down or whittle it down into, hey, I only want to move this forward when these criteria are met. So when you're kind of in Zapier and you're testing these things, it'll tell you pretty clearly, hey, this would have continued, right? It's got our estimate proposal. We have a cell phone number in there. The filtering also can be or, so we can say, hey, only continue if this and this. We can also say only continue if this or this, right? If it's maybe not as relevant, or we can really get away with a couple different scenarios. So once we have our our filtering in place there. Then we can get into our action, which for this instance, I use MailChimp. So again, the setup piece is just finding that application that you're using. Oftentimes just using your login information, or maybe they'll have you generate an API key on their side as well. My action event here is to add and update a subscriber. So basically, we're just taking, once we reach estimate proposal status here, then I'm going to go into add them to a subscriber to a new campaign or a new journey. And then in the configure section, we're choosing, what audience that we want. We're choosing a subscriber into that audience, and then I'm running a journey with that audience. And then we're capturing their email from our contacts. We're also able to capture first names, last names, anything that's in that initial payload. But really for this, I need their phone number, I need their email, and then we're just, kind of we're off and running there. So, this is set up pretty, just simply because the use case could be so broad. But essentially what I'm doing is, hey, when we hit this status in Contractors Cloud, I want to start this journey or start this campaign, or maybe we just want it over in another platform, and that's a manual texting platform that we go back and forth, and how we control all of our communication that way. So that's really kind of the gist of that portion of it. Again, get to that end, you can retest those steps, check in your other software, and those things should be coming through, accordingly.
Mike, a couple of questions came in on this one. One, I
Sure.
think we touched on a few, but I think to review it and put it out there, Robert asked if you could give a few use case scenarios for the filter, right? And Robert, think of this at a high level, as Mike was alluding to with that webhook. We are sending a lot of information, right? When Mike says payload, it is basically a whole bunch of different fields and data and information that's being sent over. What the filter allows you to do is only pick out specific pieces of that data that then make sure that that automation runs, right? So Mike, maybe, you kind of touched on those, making sure that data is there, specifically looking for a field. If something matches or is greater than a certain number, all of those things, you're using the filter to signal, continue to run this automation because we do have the right information in the payload.
Yeah. Another one that I really see quite a bit from our user base, it would be this concept of a data group ID. So there's a little bit of knowledge knowing what that is, or that's part of what we're here to help you with if you're going to go through and set any of these up. But the data group ID is basically your subcategory. So if you're using subcategories inside of Contractors Cloud, that'd be another option for, hey, I only want these to go out if our subcategory is tagged as what I want it to, in order to send it to this next step or next platform. So if we were to look in our filtering here, we could say, okay, only continue if it's estimate proposal, if it's the cell phone number exists, and I can choose any of the fields that we've got within that payload that we send, and I can use that group ID. And we could say, again, so we could say text exactly matches, and we'd find that ID based off of a test, right? So you'd tag that with a subcategory of, please send this to MailChimp. And if I have that subcategory in there, maybe that category number is 7898. So again, just another limiting thing to make sure that, we are not sending this to our other platforms if it's not something we absolutely want to send it there. one great example of that is, we all run into maybe some clients that aren't exactly happy at the end of a project, and maybe throughout the process of getting their, home improvement project done, we want to tag them as like please don't send a review, right? Or something along those lines. Subcategories would be a great way to do that. But you be able to, use this filtering, text containing things greater than, less than, exist, does not exist, exact IDs, lots of different options, just to make sure that, when we get to that final action that we're trying to run, that we're getting the right jobs there is really it.
Yep. Great explanation. Filtering just gives you so much more power to be able to pinpoint exactly what information at what time for what reasons continue your automation to go on. The other question we have, Mike, before we jump into the next one is, can you do the reverse of the first Zap that we looked at? Can you create a Zap where when you put a lead into Contractor Cloud, that being that trigger, that then the action is it puts it into an Excel sheet as a row?
Absolutely. So the way we would do that is actually very similar. So that would be a catch. That would be a catch hook as well. Inside of Contractors Cloud, so in Stratus, in this integrations area, where you would set up that webhook, so the same place that I set up the webhook for a status to be changed, you would catch a webhook in Zapier, and then you would use the webhook event of a project created. So to answer that question, absolutely. Yep, you would set up a webhook to kick off anytime a new project is created. And then you would catch that webhook as your trigger in Zapier, and then move on to your action in a Google Sheet or any other platform that you're wanting to generate that lead to.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Robert, for the questions on those. With that, we will take a look at our third and final Zap. A few more steps here. We're getting a little trickier, not only using the filter, but using a couple other of the Zapier capabilities with formatting and looping. So this last one is using to start with a webhook for completed jobs. And here's where we're focusing in on once a project is marked completed in Contractors Cloud and it's over $10,000, then we want to automatically send, it might be a thank you email or a feedback survey, direct mailer or a review request. So Mike's going to walk through this one. Again, we start off with the webhooks and that payload, all of the information, and then he's going to run it through a few different steps to hone in on the specifics that we talked about. And then in the Zap example here, it's going to create a spreadsheet row. But ultimately, you can make this work with sending an email out via Gmail or your customer survey via SurveyMonkey, postcard via SendJim. Nice job for review. Again, these are just some of the examples of all the different end connections you can make with this. The use cases, the job is complete, it meets certain criteria, and now the automation is going to be sending out some type of request for information or getting in front of that customer with another step. So with that one, Mike, I'll let you walk through this third and final Zap of this section.
Perfect. All right, so this one should feel pretty familiar to the one we just looked at. This is another example of just catching a webhook. So setup piece will be the kind of primarily the same. We're looking at catching a webhook as our event, and then when we test that, we've got our different records. We've got that URL, so that would be another unique URL that's getting created there. So if you're setting these up inside of Contractors Cloud, you'd end up setting up several different webhooks, so that we're routing them in the right direction. The second thing that we're going to do in this example, what we're looking at is we've got a job here that's closed complete, but we have 3 contacts So we've got contact 1, contact 2 here with an email address, and then we have contact 3 here as well. And this is more just kind of highlighting some of the format things you can do within Zapier. So the first thing that we're going to do is called a formatter. And so what we're going to do is we're setting up a formatter, and our action is going to be just text from that original payload that's coming in. And what we're configuring here is that we're trying to extract an email address, right? So we're basically saying, hey, in this payload, you might have all kinds of different text within a payload, or if an email was entered in incorrectly, or there's formatting in there that's kind of wrong, we can then extract that, and it'll help identify what the email addresses are within that. So when we're able to do that, it's going to look through that first payload, and it's going to give us our outputs here and say, okay, here's 1 email address, here's 2, and here's 3. In this scenario, I'm trying to send, I'm creating a spreadsheet row, but let's say I'm trying to send a review out. We've got 3 project contacts. I really only want it to go to the first one. I don't really need project contact 2 or 3 to be involved in this. We're just going to focus on the primary contact. So what that allows us to do is pull these email addresses out, and then this step 3 is called looping, and to create a loop. So you'll notice that when we send over your contacts, for example, in step 2, we put all 3 email addresses in one data field that goes out. Some softwares may not like that, right? You may try to put an email address in, and it's going to be looking for 1 email address, not 3 that are separated by a comma or something like that. So what the loop allows us to do is we can create a loop, and we can choose what value we want to loop, and we can choose that data point, right? So we can say, okay, in this output, I've got a comma as my delimiter. So that's basically saying, as I see a comma, we're going to kind of split those out so that I can get an individual email address at the end of this road. I can test this with that same payload, and you'll see now we're able to pull a loop iteration 1, and we can get out that first and primary email address. We've got loop 1, loop 2, and loop 3. Then we get back into filtering. So this should be looking very similar to the Zap that we just looked at. But now we're just looking at, hey, only continue this if our status contains closed complete. So we're only looking at jobs that are in closed complete status. Our data financials. So we have all these different financial numbers that will come over with those payloads. So we're saying, hey, as long as the data financials are greater than 10,000, and that we make sure that contact email actually exists. So those are kind of the 3 criteria that we're running here. We can run those, and we can basically see, hey, yes, there are email addresses there. We have, we have our amount higher than what we're looking for. And maybe that's part of like a direct mailer or a gift that you're going to send out or something like that based on job size. And then our status is closed complete. So at that point, then we can get into our final action, which I've connected to Google Sheet. My action here is that I'm going to create a spreadsheet row. We've connected, what Google account are we looking at? We configure it with what spreadsheet do I actually want to place this on, and then we can go ahead and map the data again that we've collected or caught along the way. So we're able to say, okay, here's our address, here's our city, here's our state, here's our zip code. I really don't need a phone number on this one. I just need that first email address so I can pull that out so that we can send out a survey or some sort of thank you, or whatever campaign it is that we want to run.
Awesome, Mike. Would you demonstrate real quick too, um, just how easy it is to add another step into your Zap, right? We started off with just, a trigger and an action. Then we showed with a filter. Now we have three, different tools in between. So just show people real quick that you can start with something simplistic. And when you realize I need this to have a condition or only run based on this or only grab this information, how easy it is to insert that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really just as simple as, adding your steps in between here. So whenever you've got, trigger and action, and we need to add filtering, or we need to create a loop, or we need to format something, we just click add step here. That'll open up, all the different options. This would be also where you would set up, triggers and actions if it's the actual software that you're looking for. Or we've got our kind of popular built-in tools like filtering, formatting, catching that webhook for the initial trigger. This is searchable, so we could look up Calendly here and use that, and then it's gonna kind of walk you through or prompt you through. Here's what we're choosing. Here's our list of events that we have for that option or for that software, and then connecting that account and finishing the setup for that piece. So the ability to add and add additional filtering or any steps along the way, very, very easy to do within Zapier.
Nice. One question we have here before we wrap on the Zapier and move into milestones to wrap up our webinar today. Brianna asks, just to clarify, Zapier is compatible with Stratus only. Can you kind of explain how that works again, Mike?
That is a good question. The answer is no. The setup portion of it is probably easiest to do inside of Stratus, but Stratus being where it is and where we're going, it is a live database that talks with Contractors Cloud Classic. So I'm doing a lot of the setup in here as far as creating an access token, creating webhooks, managing your leads to be able to see where those leads are coming in, setting up lead connections, all that. However, that stuff will flow through to Contractors Cloud Classic. So if I were to look back in Classic here and look back in my file cabinet, here's the job that we brought in from Zapier today. All of those things will flow through to Contractors Cloud Classic. Stratus is just kind of a nice hub to be able to handle all the setup of it, as well as manage. The one thing that you would need Stratus for in managing it would be that that leads area, right? So when we're in Stratus leads, this is kind of the area that you'd be able to manage. Hey, I set up a Zap that starts generating projects automatically into Contractors Cloud. This would be the spot that daily checks or however frequent that works for you. Just be checking, hey, is anything getting hung up in here, and not making its way through automatically into our file cabinet.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Mike.
Yeah.
All right. With that, great stuff on Zapier, a lot to take in. Just as someone else asked, again, we will be emailing out a recap. We will also post this tomorrow. The recording of this, exactly what you're watching right now, will be on our blog, contractors.com/blog. So you can watch it there and on our YouTube channel as many times as needed. That's why we've done it in this format and had Mike break down all these steps so you can pause and hit play and walk through those how you want. Definitely incredibly helpful. The last thing we want to touch on for the last 5-10 minutes of today's webinar is milestones, right? Milestones are these individual steps inside of our workflows. They're actionable checkpoints to track where a job's at and what can be done next. And Mike really has some ideas and tips and ways to utilize milestones in this to really get the most out of that. So with that, Mike, take it away and let us know some of the things that we can be better leveraging using milestones.
Perfect. So where I'm going to bring you to start is going to be the area that we set up these workflows. So if we go up into our dashboard and then go down to corporate dashboard, This is where you're able to create, edit milestones, put together different workflows. So we'll look at a standard workflow that's set up. Within that workflow, we're gonna be able to predetermine our team. This is just a nice piece. This comes into play within each individual milestone. It's something that is a good refresher, because if you think about all the responsibilities that need to happen within or throughout a job, different people are going to have different responsibilities, and different roles are going to have different responsibilities, even if that person is the same that's kind of displayed here. So I always like to think in terms of role, make this workflow or this team a little bit more expanded, because eventually I might hire a production manager. I might hire, if I'm a smaller company that's growing, I might hire a sales manager. That having those roles already defined within your milestones and different tasks and things that are assigned to those people, it makes it really easy to swap that out, to be able to say, okay, I'm no longer the sales manager here. I'm able to easily swap in, Aaron as my sales manager, and now he's going to get on these workflows moving forward. He's going to get all those tasks that the sales manager would get. He's going to get all those emails. Within the individual milestones themselves, there's a lot that we can do and we can control. When we look to edit an individual milestone, for example, we can effectively change things when we go into a milestone or when we complete a milestone. So think of it as, when we enter a milestone, like we enter number 5, some things can happen, or when we complete everything in number 5, on completion of that milestone, we can make some things happen. On entry, we can do tasks, we can do emails, and we can do text messages. Within our tasks, one thing that I think gets missed in terms of just a feature that's there is a workflow or a pass-through task, right? So some tasks might happen at a certain point at a certain milestone and say, we need this done before we can move forward. Some things might not really want to hold up the workflow at that point, right? We get to a point where we want to start the supplementing process early on in a job. I might want that task to go out to a supplementer of mine, but I don't want it to hold up the workflow because they're kind of working down different channels or different avenues. So we can make pass-through tasks happen that don't hold up a workflow. We can also do pass-through tasks that auto close on milestone completed. So not putting the onus on making sure that task gets closed, just saying, hey, as long as everything else got done in that milestone, we're going to automatically close that task too. For example, you might have a task to schedule material, schedule the work orders. But once we have a condition that just automatically does that, we could set that task as a pass-through to close to make sure that, hey, as long as everything that is done in that milestone that we were looking for, we're just going to automatically close that task for you. We can, change subjects, change who that task is to, who that task is from, as well as how many days we want to give. We want to give that person to do that task. We can also send, emails and texts. These can be internally, internal. Going to a manager, going to, just who we're handing this on to next. Or it can also be an external thing. So if I look at, for example, step 5 here, I have an exit email template set that's just a roof scheduled. So you can use these as an automation. It's a little more generic than a, maybe like a webhook zap and nurturing with some different texting or emailing campaigns. But you could send a touch, right? It's another touch. So we could say, once I get everything scheduled here, when we complete this milestone, I'm going to send off this email to our homeowner. And it just lets them know, hey, your roof has been scheduled. Somebody from our team will be reaching out to you. maybe some instructions of, here's what to expect on the day of the build, right? Within these milestones, we can also set up questions. So if I were to look in milestone 3 here, we simply just have a yes or no question set up where if we say no, we're going to pop in additional milestones or even entirely new workflows. So we can say, hey, if we answer no on this job sold, we're going to bring in a milestone customer follow-up. And that's going to show now between steps 3 and 4. And we might have different tasks or things to do in that milestone as well. You might have another question in that one of, is the job sold at this point? If we say no again there, maybe it kicks over to a sales manager or somebody to review to make sure, hey, is this still a deal that's on the table? Is this dead? We need to move on. Put it in somebody else's hands. So questions are a way that we can certainly, bring in some of those special circumstances that happen along the flow of a job, because not everything is going to go from A to Z as you ideally would want it to. Let's see here, but yeah, so the milestones themselves are just really important to think of in terms of what needs to happen inside of this particular step before we move forward to anything else. We also have conditions within these milestones. So that could be project contains work orders, project contains scheduled work orders. These would be these yellow flags along the way here. And these are things that Contractors Cloud is just going to recognize. So instead of a task that needs to be closed, and someone saying, yes, I've done this, now we have things in place that can say, hey, Contractors Cloud can see we have work orders on that job. We're going to cross that condition off. One of the special things that you can do with the conditions is this is a hard set list. So if we look at our conditions, this is a hard set list by Contractors Cloud. But there's one here for custom that allows you to do custom file photo uploads. And then you can pick your tag, right? So essentially that's saying, if I get into this milestone, the only way I'm getting out of it is that I go into our files, I upload the certificate of completion, and then I go ahead and tag it as such. It's a really nice way to keep your data really solid, because if you save a file onto a computer, it could be the name of that file could be any different string of letters and numbers. There's no real indicator of what that file is. The tagging system allows us to say, hey, we're not moving forward till that's tagged. And then once it is tagged, anyone that goes into that job can see very clearly that's our COC, right? That's our first initial scope, or that's our adjuster's scope. And so it helps whenever other people are starting to look at that file, that they're not looking and clicking through all your different files to make sure that they're seeing the ones that they're supposed to see. So the milestones, are just kind of our roadmap, our step-by-step guide. You can have multiple milestones within one status. So if we're looking at, post-production, making sure that we get our inspection and our completion done. If we're looking at sending that final invoice, both within the same status, you can do that. It's more of a, as long as things are needing to happen sequentially and not at the same time, a milestone's a really good breakup for that. And so, oh, go ahead. Yeah, Aaron.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, with our timing, we should probably wrap, but that's awesome stuff, Mike. I think what's really great and nice to point out in between these two topics is milestones, and what you're showing here within our workflows is really somewhat related to Zapier, right? You're building out automations in what you want to have happen when certain things take place. And that same type of framework and approach is built into workflows and milestones. And there's just so many options. You just shared a few. There's dozens more. Definitely something that we can, continue to touch on in future webinars as well. So Here's just a few of the takeaways from some of what Mike talked about. There's even more that we can get to as we go along. Definitely check out that blog post we had on Milestones. Just some of the great things with using it with the Milestone Performance Report to track velocity is definitely a favorite of our team as well. Ultimately, hopefully, I think this went great, Mike. How'd you feel about this?
I hope so.
You did a great job, man. You covered a lot in a very short amount of time. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of this. We definitely shared a lot today. We're looking forward to doing more of these. Look for an invite to another one, probably coming later this summer. And I already alluded to a few times, we will be posting the recording of this to our blog and YouTube channel tomorrow. So that'll be available to you. If you're going to check out Zapier, again, that access is included in all of our Contractors Cloud plans. You do need to set up an account with Zapier to start making that happen. Use that recording to build out your zaps and start playing around. We're definitely always willing to be of help and point you in directions. Obviously, when it comes to things Zapier, they have a massive help guide, webinars, videos, so many different things to pick up on their format and the things to do there. But really powerful being able to use Zapier and Contractors Cloud together. All right. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for joining us. We will continue to put out more content like this. And until then, hopefully you guys have a great season, and we will talk to you on the next Cloud Connect webinar.